As a director, does Netflix pay you residuals?
Ooh, no. And I don't know if that's true for every film, of course. But at least at the level I'm at and with these films, no, there's no residuals for that. And I don't know if that's the same for actors. So I think actors with SAG and all of that, obviously there's a much different probably deal there. I'm trying to remember, because there was negotiations for streaming at some point. I'm bad with keeping up on all the latest information with that. But for myself, no.
If a group of young filmmakers came to you and said they wanted to make movies only for Netflix, what would you advise them in terms of story, production, budget?
Yeah, for Netflix, that's interesting because it's kind of this ever-moving thing. So, in what trends on there, I would say that Netflix, at least in my experience or my perception of it, is a little bit more kind of an algorithm-based thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like a YouTube, but not the same as YouTube, but very much like what attracts viewership and things like that is a little bit more. It is constantly changing, so that's a hard one to figure out. I think. Netflix also does things on all spectrums. I mean, they have movies that are made at a couple million. They have movies that are made at 100 million. So it's really hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what to say would work to help you get it sold onto Netflix. Other than just, try and make stories that resonate with an audience. Obviously, try and make it it's got to be of a certain standard, certain quality. So I think those are goals to shoot for. But yeah, that's a tough one to say. I think there's probably the two spectrums of budget levels. You've got the ones that you probably want to keep, under a certain amount because then the sale to Netflix makes sense. Because if you make it for too much, you're never going to get that amount back, if that makes sense. But then on the flip side, if you've got, big name actors in it, whoever that might be, a Will Smith or something, then obviously those numbers completely change. So you could make a $50 million movie and still sell it and it would make sense on Netflix. But again, I think a lot of those are more of the Netflix originals as well, that they're willing to put in that kind of a commitment for a big movie like that. I don't really see them going after the, more low budget stuff like the sub $1 million films. But again, I could be wrong because I just don't know all the inner workings of it. But they definitely also have parameters in place for your gear. So I'd say first and foremost, if that's really your goal, probably the best advice I could say was find out the specs that they require because they actually do really require certain specs. Like I believe it has to be shot in 4K minimum. And they literally have gear approved. They have a gear approved list for Netflix, like what you can film on, what cameras they approve, and things like that. So they actually do have some technical aspects that you could kind of, for lack of a better word, screw yourself out of ever getting a Netflix deal if you don't meet certain parameters. Again, I don't know exactly what all those are, and they do change, but I do know that there are certain, like I believe the Blackmagic Pocket cameras are actually approved for Netflix. So something on that level, which is still affordable, and to a certain degree, are still at enough quality level to be approved by a Netflix. I believe. Again, don't quote me on any of this, but there are certain ones that aren't for whatever reason. It doesn't meet the specs. Maybe the color space isn't deep enough, doesn't have enough bits or whatever. So that would be the starting point. Like, make sure you check with that kind of stuff and make your goals of filming it to meet those certain parameters. Other than that, I think they obviously stream such a wide variety of things. You can see I've got very kind of family-friendly PG movies in Lady Driver and Roped that actually were really successful on Netflix. They trended, they were on the popular lists. Roped, I think, climbed as high as like 22 on like most popular film on Netflix. And it's a very much PG, family-friendly. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where you've got the, very gritty, dark, the Stranger Things and those kinds of shows that are extremely successful. So I think they really are open to a variety of genres and styles of filmmaking. So it's really hard to pinpoint, what would work and what wouldn't work on there. But obviously, check the specs. That's where I'd start, and then make a good story, and be as creative and get the best quality that you can.
And are those specs available to the public on their website, or
I think so.
Really?
Okay. Where I've read about it has been more in like the like film gear, like websites and publications like that. I have seen like, hey, this camera is actually meets Netflix approved specs. I personally never have seen a sheet or whatever that says what those specs are, but and I've never searched it up, but I have read about it, like I said, in those like 4kshooter.com or something like that. One of those websites. I've read about the different cameras and if they meet the spec. Like this red Komodo that just came out, it got Netflix approved. So you can use this new red camera that's it's kind of a much smaller red, and I believe it shoots 6K. So it doesn't do the 8K that the newer reds or the other reds are doing now. Like we filmed California Christmas on a red Geminis that are 8K. And we shot with some vintage lenses though. We had these vintage anamorphic Kowas that we shot on this 8K new camera. I actually really love trying to meld old and new. That's something that really kind of excites me, even to the point at which I have been known to search, eBay for some vintage style lenses that might not fit on my cameras, but I will figure out a way to adapt them. Even with metal files out in the garage, I'm shaving down, mounting parts to make them fit together, and I love experimenting with that kind of stuff. So anytime I get that opportunity, I do it. This was the second film that I took really like vintage anamorphic style lenses and matched them with the newer cameras, and I love the results. I think it's just makes for really interesting imagery, and I just love anamorphic as well. If I had a choice, I would film everything on anamorphic. Just a quality to it that excites me.